Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast where we discuss Bhagavad Gita and wisdom from Bhakti Yoga and how to bring it into our everyday lives in practical ways. My name is Kishore, and I am here with Achyuta Gopi. How are you doing this morning, Achyuta?
I'm good. I'm good. I was gonna come up with a new one, but it's you know what? This week
It's a classic. That's a good answer.
we're just good this week. How are you doing, Kishore?
I'm I'm gonna say that I'm better. I'm better than before. So that's good, right?
Dang, we are okay. We are getting through it this week, guys.
Uh,
Ryan.
um, we are reading from Bhagavad Gita. We're in the last three verses of chapter 1 of the Gita. I believe it's verse 44.
Yeah,
So do you want to take us away, Achyuta, and maybe give us a little intro into what we're doing?
sure. Let's start it out. Um, the last week we've been speaking about Arjuna, where his loyalties lie, where his mind is, what his mindset is about, how he is looking at the kind of almost destruction of a family. And we were kind of talking about this idea that all of these societal things kind of rest on your shoulders. And then this idea of surrendering that and kind of knowing when that doesn't have to be your burden to bear. Doesn't always have to be your plight to carry the fate of the entire society on your shoulders, even though sometimes it might look like that. And what it means when we are trying to stand up for our own ideals, even in spite of what it might look like to go against everyone we know, and and how to just kind of like navigate through that. And so now we have Arjuna, who has been kind of looking across both sides of a battlefield and seeing every member of his community, everybody he's ever known, and really reassessing this idea of this battle and what it is he's about to do. Um, and we've been talking about perspective, etc. So we'll also get more into that. But text 44 is, alas, how strange it is that we are preparing to commit greatly sinful acts. Driven by the desire to enjoy royal happiness, we are intent on killing our own kinsmen. This verse is kind of interesting because we talked about Arjuna's compassion being triggered and invoked. And he's really giving us, like, these all sound really good as blanket statements. If you take them out of context, it just sounds extremely wise. And it is. It's very wise and very understanding. Um, but then sometimes I try to look at, but what happened to precipitate this battle? It didn't just happen in a vacuum. And it wasn't as though Krishna was callous to everyone's life. And we can kind of feel that way if we enter into Bhagavad Gita without context, that Krishna kind of just was like, you know what? I'm done this day. Kill everyone. But there was so much that happened before that Krishna felt like, but I'm supposed to protect my people. Sure, I am within the hearts of everyone. Absolutely. But those people who have taken shelter of me, I have to give them some sort of special dispensation. Otherwise, what is the purpose of the supreme person? What is the purpose of our relationship with the supreme person? And Krishna's going to be like, they're going to look at me and wonder what I'm doing as supreme headmaster if I don't give any special dispensation to those who have surrendered their lives to me. And so he's looking at all of these these people and saying, but even God tried
Mm.
to broker peace. He tried, he really did. And when he tried to broker peace, the opposing side decided that it would be a great idea to try and arrest him and imprison him for no reason. And this, kind of brings me to the idea of allowing people to have the consequences of their actions. That face, Kishore, was classic. It
I
said
really
so
love this
much.
point.
It said so much. And sometimes, we have conversations with people, or we'll have interactions with people, and then we start to do the things that try to save them from the consequences of the actions. And sometimes we kind of have to allow the consequences to occur.
Yeah, it's a really amazing point. That's why I made that face. Because I think that a lot of the times, especially like the ethos of the culture right now, is kind of a performative, we have to save everybody or we have to be compassionate. And when you use a word so much like compassion or like love, it kind of starts to become divested of its meaning, you know, and we start to confuse what real compassion is or what real love is, and I think people are confused, nowadays of what real love is, what real compassion is. And so we're understanding here that the most compassionate thing for Arjuna to do is actually to fight, right? He might be saying no, 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 like this is not the best thing to do. But I really like that you brought this point in, Achuta, of like zooming out and contextually placing things, because with high kind of like value language, anything can sound, like you were saying, anything can sound very wise, and it is very wise from like this zoomed out perspective. And I think that kind of stuff gets people into trouble, when we're trying to have really, really, really high values. And this is Arjuna we're talking about. Arjuna's like Krishna's cousin, like literally a saintly person. And so I want to kind of say that before what I'm going to say, like we can have these very high values, but if we haven't internally understood like the nature of the world and the nature of who I am and the nature of my relationship with the world and God and etc., what Krishna is about to explain in the whole Bhagavad Gita, then I can have all the high values I want, but when push comes to shove, I'm going to act based on my stuff, on the stuff that I'm carrying, on my narratives, on my whatever, on my conditionings, on my traumas, and whatever, and I think that that's so interesting because Arjuna is like Arjuna, and
Yeah.
he has to go through this dark night of the soul. Like he has to go through that. And I think it's really humbling actually to see what we're about to see at the beginning of chapter 2, because it's like, wow, okay, this very high, ranking, high valued, like precious person to Krishna, um, is he has to go through this dark night of the soul. So why do I think that I don't have to go through that? Or if I am going through it, and I'm including myself in this, if I am going through it, a lot of the times the feeling is like, why, like, why do I have to go through this so hard? I can't do this. Like, look at all those happy people over there. They're just enjoying life. Like, why do I have to do this? And it's like, no, 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 no. Those other people that we're looking at, we're just taking it out of context. And we have a perfect example here of Arjuna, who is like so precious and dear to Krishna, and he has to go through the dark night of the soul. So it's actually a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you were saying, there's so much in what you were saying, including this idea of the grass being greener on the other side. Arjuna's looking over and he's saying, but you know what? I think this non-confrontational kind of way of doing things would really benefit everyone. And I like how, you know, in a minute Krishna's about to like snap back and be like, well, did it benefit everybody? Because I don't think it did. Like, you were in exile for 13 years. You were driven out of your kingdom. Your wife was abused. You were abused. They tried to kill you. They tried to imprison me. Like, I tried, and they even tried to get me. What makes you think that somehow this is all magically going to work? What's going to make it work out? He's like, if you've got a plan, you can tell me the plan. I'll hear it out. But what actually is going to make this work out, and what's actually going to fix this? And I like this idea that like God has kind of gotten to the end of the rope of his patience with some people. Because I feel like we all have that those moments where we get to the ends of our rope of our patience, and then we're kind of just wondering, oh, this is just because I'm in like a conditioned, embodied soul. And I like that God is like, no, sometimes things need to happen. And so, I think when we're looking around and we're even looking at things that happen with us, we have to understand that sometimes some things happen, and we are constantly looking for people to blame or shoulder the burden for us. Not only are we not willing to let others have the consequences of their actions, but we definitely don't want us to have the consequences of our actions either. And so we're constantly looking for something else to shoulder the burden. I am this way because the parents. I am this way because society. I am this way because whatever. I can't dive fully into life because of this, and this. And finally, I feel like Krishna's like, when do we take a good look at like what's our stuff? And here, this entire Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is urging Arjuna. He's like, look at their stuff, and then look at your stuff, and now let's deal with it honestly. And I think it's such a vulnerable moment for a pure devotee to have. This person's a warrior. Imagine if you saw the general of whatever army. They're supposed to be like blocks of steel, and all of a sudden it's just before battle and they completely break down. And then not only do they break down, but they like televise it so that everybody can see the breakdown. And this is what we have in Bhagavad Gita. It's like this incredibly, really, really vulnerable moment. And I've always kind of been thankful for it. Thankful that Arjuna didn't say, can we leave this out of the narrative? Like, can we could just bypass this point. Like, we don't have to, like, because from now until time immemorial, like, hey Arjuna, remember that time you broke down? Thanks for that. Can we dissect that and really unpack what happened there again and again and again and again? And then we're gonna forget. So can we unpack that again? If it were me, I think I'd be really highly uncomfortable. But the wonderful thing about pure devotees is that they have allowed this dissection of their feelings, their motives, their ideas, their hard times, their dark night of the soul. How many of us are even really honestly talking to everybody about their dark night of the soul? Like, we might hint at it. Yeah, I include myself on the podcast, but we're not like sitting there on the podcast. Let's go in depth.
We're not getting into details.
Right? Like, okay, let's go into minute, incredible detail, painful detail.
I think it's we're not going there. We're not pure devotees, so we don't have to.
It's true.
But I do really love this point that you're making, that Arjuna so willingly, we have his example. And I think role models are so important to have. And I think that when you look at Bhagavad Gita, when you look at Srimad Bhagavatam, and just like all of our wonderful sacred texts that we read, there's actually so many role models. And there's actually so many saints and pure devotees that you read about that's like, whoa, like this is epic, like this is crazy, like this is really something for me to learn from. And I don't know why I'm going in this direction, but it just seems that that's where I'm going. But like, if you look at the role models that we have nowadays in society, it's just like, what? You know, like
Mm.
like how did we get here, and what are we doing, and why are we listening to this garbage? And this is just silly, you know, it's just silly. I had a moment the other day, I'm going to out myself. I had a moment the other day where I was listening to Beyonce on her new album. And I was just like walking down the street and I was like, yeah, yeah, you know, and I was like and I was talking to my partner, Brudge, and I was just like, what is she even saying? Like, let's have a moment. Like, let's just look at the lyrics. And then he and I were reading the lyrics together and we were just like, this is so dumb. Like, what is she saying? None of this makes sense, you know, like this is just like all over the place and kind of nonsense. And you know, that didn't stop me from listening to it while I was walking down
Okay.
the street.
Okay.
But you know, I think that it's like, how am I understanding what I'm really taking? Because I think that, you know, whatever everyone's doing, you know, we're not here to judge and this, whatever your version of Beyonce is. It's but what it comes down to is like, who am I really looking up to? Like, what am I really taking as the teaching? You know, like who am I aspiring to be and to be like? And I think that that's kind of stuff is so important because okay, I'll tie this back in together, because Arjuna kind of gives a really great example of how we can make anything seem just and cool and good. You know, it's like, I'm sure through high philosophical language I could prove that Beyonce is wise. You know, I'm sure that I could prove it through like, and she's compassionate and all this stuff, you know, through high language. I'm sure I could do it. And I think that that's really interesting and important. It's like this wonderful example that's being given to us. It's like, wait a minute. There's something deeper than all of this. And we need to go beyond just like the kind of high ideals. And we really need to look at things in context and not just from like, oh, this sounds nice. Like this sounds right, you know?
No, that's exactly true. And I was thinking about it because there's and in the next few verses, like Arjuna kind of hones in on that. He like runs that home. Like, better for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra, weapons in hand, were to kill me unarmed and unresisting on the battlefield. This is an example. You've got a really high moral ground, and you've got a really high philosophical point. But then we have to really look at what's going on here. There's an example in Srimad Bhagavatam, and there's someone speaking, and they're saying, you know, all of these things, death, rebirth, coming together, falling apart, these things happen due to inevitable time. And inevitable time is governed by the supreme person, and we are all under the hand of fate. And we really have to understand that our true selves are outside of this governance of inevitable time in this hand of fate. The truest version of ourselves is outside of all that. Everybody's like, yes, the person speaking is a demon
Mm.
who will later go on to try and kill his 5-year-old son.
That whole
So,
section of Bhagavatam, whenever I read it, I'm just like, yeah, Hiranyakashipu was making a lot of sense.
okay,
Like,
this man was about to be the worst, like, offender ever. And instead, like, he's talking to his mother, he's talking to his sister-in-law, he had just lost his brother, and he's sitting there and he's saying, you know, everything is really governed by eternal time. You guys have got to, like, let go of the depression, you know, let it go. And it sounds like every new age philosophy, really sound, really smart. And then he turns around and he's like, and I've got the perfect solution. We should all kill Vishnu. And then you're like, wait, what? It's like record scratch. What's just happened here? And then he's gonna go and so, like, you know, what what does the high philosophical point bring you if it isn't tied with your spiritual values? So Arjuna here is kind of giving a really good point about exactly what you just said. There's this idea anything could be made philosophically sound. And there were people throughout the history of spiritualism who would study logic and argument in order to have debates. But the purpose of the debate was just to debate. Like at a certain point, you become the meme that just says, "Oh, you want to argue." Like that's it. Like you just want to argue the philosophical point. There's no coming to any kind of conclusion. And so I think Krishna really, he goes in, he's like, we could be arguing about this for forever. And still there would be no point to it. Because the end all be all is these people perform some actions and some reactions are going to have to occur. Like that is it. And earlier what you were saying, just to bring it on back all the way to the beginning. Speaking about, when words get used so often and so loosely, they start to like lose the gravity of their meaning. And we see it a lot today. There's so much. It's like trauma, gaslighting, anxious attachment. There's like all these titles that are coming out now, and I'm like, what do these even mean? How did we get here? Why do I feel like a new puppy instead of a human? I really feel like I'm a potty trained puppy, and my owner, my human, went out for too long, and I don't know what to do with myself. And instead of a thinking, feeling, intellectual, like what just happened here? And so in using all of this, I'll give you an example. I saw somebody and they were like, "Oh my God, I was totally gaslit by my 3-year-old." I was like, "Your 3-year-old's not gaslighting you. I don't think that's what's happening. Your 3-year-old is being the 3-year-old that you've allowed them to be. The 3-year-old's not gaslighting you because the 3-year-old doesn't know anything about that. Like it, as with as much knowledge as you think your 3-year-old came to this incarnation with, I guarantee you, your 3-year-old's not trying to gaslight you. Give them at least till 5 when they can talk and act like Dhruva or Prahlad Maharaj. Then maybe. But even then, I don't think that your 3-year-old's gaslighting you. I think that we've gotten all of these terms, and in trying to put language to what we're feeling, we as society have done what we always do, and we've gone a little too far. And I feel like we need to like rein it back in and actually look at the gravity of the situations, because when we see these spiritually minded people, we have so many examples of role models. Like you were saying, there are actual role models. But if you look at scripture and sacred literature from any tradition, they are not focusing on the happy times in these people's lives. Ever. I was talking with Radhanath Maharaj one time, and he said, we have so many pure devotees, and they don't ever focus on the good things in their lives. It's like, why is it? It's like everybody's just suffering. We're talking about, if you talk about Arjuna, it's his suffering. And they ruled for a good amount of time, but it's mostly the suffering. If you talk about any of our scripturally sound people, it's all the sufferings, right? We've got suffering. Why? Why are we talking about the sufferings? Because that's real trauma. This is really where, like, if you really want to talk about all of the labels and all of the philosophically sound things, it's coming from this suffering, this trauma. Today's role models, I dare say, don't have quite as much trauma. But if you look at the people who really made impacts, if you look at people like Oprah, why was she such a big deal? She had a heck of a lot of trauma. There was so much that she was overcoming. And every time she said, but look what I did, I was able to overcome this and then become a talk show. But despite every single obstacle, real hardcore obstacles, that was inspiring. That was what pushed people to the next level, pushed people to look outside of themselves and outside of their circumstances and say, okay, you know what? Fine. If Oprah can do it, no problem. I can do it. And maybe she'll give me a car in the process, whatever the case is. And so when we look at Arjuna, Krishna is about to tell him, like, let's not forget what you've had to overcome, bro. There's been so much. And so just like Arjuna, we look at role models, and what's the first thing that any well, a lot of the pop culture role models have said was, but I didn't ask for this. Whenever they're like held accountable for whatever has happened, they're like, but I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be a role model. Yes, you did. Yeah, you did. Yes, we did. We kind of did. And so Arjuna's looking, he's like, I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be on this battlefield. I didn't want to do this. Krishna's like, homie, not only did we ask for it, they asked for it. They're asking for it. Like at a certain point, we've got to put it down and allow them to reap the consequences. Like everybody's asking for it. Role models in spiritual life.
Role models in spiritual life. Pasha says that we're about to have the Beehive clan and the New Age millennials coming after us because of the topics that we were talking about today. I think it's such an interesting conversation. And just to wrap it up, because we are at time, and maybe we can visit this verse, but the very last verse of this Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1, Sanjay, who is narrating Bhagavad Gita, says, Arjuna, having thus spoken on the battlefield, cast aside his bow and arrows and sat down on the chariot, his mind overwhelmed with grief. And I think it's so interesting, you know, that last verse in the context of what you just said, Achita. It's like, yeah, we see the life of these saints, of these pure devotees, and we see all of the suffering that they've been through, because that suffering is actually fertile ground. You know, it's fertile ground for spiritual enlightenment. And so after Arjuna kind of trying to, you know, get his way out of the battle using high philosophy and using all these moral values and all this stuff, like at the end of it all, he was just like overcome. He's just like, no, I'm putting my bow down. I can't do this. I don't know, you know, and we'll see more of this in chapter 2. And we can dive more into that tomorrow. But we are going to go to our master taker aware, Kimberly, and see what she has for us today.
Thank you. Today we're taking away to allow others and ourselves to face the reactions to our actions. And then to have good role models, look at the full context of things and use our words intentionally. And I loved the last thing you said, Kishore, about how suffering is the fertile ground for our enlightenment.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. If anyone else in the live audience has any takeaways, please put them in the chat and we'll read them. Achyuta, any final takeaways you walking away with today?
That's the one for me. Just this idea that, because, you know, the big question always, but why do we have to suffer? Like, why do I have to suffer in order to surrender? Like, I shouldn't have to. Like, why do we have, I get that question every day. Why do we have to suffer in order to surrender? And I was just reading recently, and Srila Prabhupada was saying, because it's not until you suffer that you start actually questioning why you are here and what you're doing. You're not, when everything is nice and it's 80 degrees all the time and the weather's perfect and you live on the beach and the sun is beaming down and you have no issues, you're not sitting there like, I wonder why I'm in this situation that I'm in. And I wonder who I am really. It's not until the opposition comes that you start wondering, like, whoa, is this really what life is meant for? Who am I? And why is this happening to me? So Srila Prabhupada was saying that the suffering is the beginning of us embracing our human existence as humans, actually intellectual humans, as apart from other animals. And we begin questioning who we are and why we're here. And so the suffering is actually integral. It's the most important thing that starts to make us differentiate from animals and actually question why we're here. So that's what I'm walking away with.
Yeah, me too, actually. Everyone seems to be resonating with that point, and we're going to get really into the suffering point in this
yeah,
first couple of verses of chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita with Arjuna. Yeah, because in many ways, like, you know, you gave the whole depiction of at least material happiness. You know, material happiness is not necessarily like that hard in a sense. Like, we know what it looks like. Like, it's like, yeah, okay, like I'm on a beach, I have things, I have whatever, I'm like taken care of materially. But and in many ways we have representations of that in society. Like that's all we have representations of, actually, of like what it looks like to be happy. But something that Jai Jagannath says, and we can unpack this later, that I really love is that we've never been taught how to suffer well. You know, it's like everyone is suffering, we're all suffering, that's kind of like a fact of life, but we're not taught how to suffer well. And then we go through it, you know, and it can get really ugly. And so I think that Bhagavad Gita is a really wonderful guide on how to suffer well, you know, through Arjuna's example. So we'll get into more of that tomorrow.
Let's do it.
Thank you all so much for your wonderful presence in the live studio audience. Thank you all out there listening. Thank you, Achita Gopi. And we will be here tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. See you all and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, everyone.